But really, it gets back to the roots. That's what community banking is all about. It's sitting down with people, it's listening, it's offering suggestions, and sometimes it's even saying no. And I think too often, we're doing a lot more of it now, but when things are really going well, the banks are just trying to throw money at people, at deals. And sometimes the best deals you do are the ones that you don't do. But so my experience with the bigger banks has allowed me, whether it's commercial banking, business banking, private banking, or consumer banking, to really look at things through different lenses, if you will. And the community banking experience, a la Bank of Manhattan, is really at a grassroots level. I mean, it is banking, it's business at the ground floor grassroots level. It's wonderful, it's great.
Now, you mentioned earlier you hope people remember the story, or not the stories, but the wars we've gone through in terms of the pain, the financial pain we've gone through in the last 2.5 years. We hope they remember that, because prior to that, going back to another comment you just made, people were throwing money at problems trying to solve it. How do you think we can prevent that from happening in the future? Occasionally saying no or something to that effect when there's a bad deal, and being able to say that to someone.
Yeah, Paul, I mean, I just hope that 2 years out, 4 years out, 10 years out, that we remember what we've gone through for the past 2.5 years. I mean, it has been brutal. Job loss, home loss, I mean, you name it. And banks as a whole were one of the main culprits. The reasons behind it, as I said, throwing money, home equity loans, 95% loans, no documentation loans. I mean, hopefully those are all a thing of the past. Now, having done this for 26 years, I've watched that pendulum swing back and forth. So we've been through some rough times before, albeit I don't think anything is as tough as, 07 to the current 2010. But hopefully we'll have learned from that. Consumers will have learned from that. Banks will have learned from that. But only time will tell. But I do worry a little bit about if money gets easy again, banks are out lending aggressively, doing deals that they really shouldn't be doing, and not saying no. But it really is a herd mentality, unfortunately, at the bank level.
And have you ever had a situation where you had to say no to someone, and then some years later they thanked you for it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one example really, or one situation back in Sacramento in the early 90s. It was a publicly traded company, and money was flowing pretty freely back then. And I'm sitting at the table, I'm meeting with the president and the CFO of this company, and they want to do a real estate deal. And I tell them, no, I don't think you should do it. And they looked at me and they said, Kevin, we have 5 other proposals from your competitors. And I said, well, okay, I'll lend you. They were looking for $5 million. I said, I'll lend you some ridiculous number, like $2.8 million. I said, that's absurd, Kevin. Everybody else is talking about twice as much money, and you're lending it, half of that, and you don't even want to do the deal. I looked at him. I said, guys, this deal doesn't make sense. You're using projections that are unrealistic. I'm just telling you. And really was told to leave the office. And I'm like, okay, but I felt in my heart of hearts, I've always been about doing the right thing, or at least tried to as best I can. So I'll never forget walking out of that meeting, and then 60 days later, I got a call to go back and meet with them. And I was younger in my career, so I grabbed one of my partners at the office and said, you're coming with me, I need some backup on this call. So anyway, went on the call, I sat down, there were the 2 guys, the president and CFO of this company. And I knew going in there, I said, oh, this isn't going to be pretty. But anyway, sat down, and the guy looked at me and said, Kevin, you're the only one with any guts in this town, in Sacramento, to say no to us. We took it in front of the board. We showed them the 5 proposals. We showed them your joke proposal at $2.8 million. And we decided not to do the deal. And we want to thank you for having the courage. And I ended up winning, didn't obviously do the real estate deal, but I ended up getting all of their commercial banking business because they felt like I did the right thing.
And the right thing pays in the long run, even if it's a little short-term pain. It's either short-term pain now or big pain later. Exactly. And the choice sometimes is to deal with that short-term pain, exactly, which a lot of people seem to not be willing to deal with. Now, talking about commercial banking, there was I think there's also a story about you having your people with 2 business cards in commercial banking, and you had to explain that to some major high-up person in the organization.
Yeah, this is going back to my Bank of America days. And Bank of America in the late 90s was acquired by Nations Bank out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and the chairman, Hugh McCall, is a legendary banker, and we were in a meeting. There was probably 20 or 30 of us, and people were talking about what they do, and I said, Kevin Campbell and I run the business banking for LA County. We had 88 people on our team. We were doing deals from $250,000 up to $2 million, and I'd said I'm with Bank of America's Business Banking Group, and somebody from the chairman's staff who was sitting right next to me, well, actually, Kevin, it's the small business bank. I said, well, you're right, it is a small business bank on our logo and our letterhead, but all 88 of my people, I allow them to have 2 business cards. One that says Bank of America Small Business Bank for internal stuff, and the other one says Bank of America Business Bank for being out in the community. You could have heard a pin drop. Everybody was like, people were like literally trying to get away from me because this guy's going to get fired on the spot, But the guy looked at me and, all right, Campbell, what are you getting at? I said, here's why I don't think we should call it the small business bank. I said, if you're a customer or prospect of Bank of America and one of my teammates walks in with a card that says the small business bank, and let's say you've got 37 employees, importing these coffee cups from wherever, China. You are now insulted by the fact that I'm calling you a small business because you don't have 37 employees. They will say, Kevin, I have 37 families that I need to take care of. That's the way the entrepreneurs, the great entrepreneurs that are passionate about what they do, they look at each of those people that are working for them as they have families to take care of. And it was funny, so as I was saying this, everybody's kind of like, people are starting to nod their head, all right. I said, that's the only reason why. I just don't want to insult that business owner that we're trying to get that $1 million line of credit from by calling him or her a small business. And what was interesting is 2 days later, I got a phone call from the number 2 guy, Ken Lewis. He said, boy, you really got me in a lot of trouble, Campbell. I said, hey, sorry, that wasn't my intent, but I always tell you what I think, like it or not, but we need to be honest. We have to have these communications. Now, actually what happened was the bank had spent, I think it was $250,000 or $300,000 to hire these outside consultants to come in on what to name that group. That was one of their assignments. And I told him, I started laughing. I said, Ken, look, next time I'll save you, I'll do it for half price. I'll do it for $150,000. All you got to do is ask your employees. But because every employee knew we shouldn't be calling it the small business bank, call it the business bank.
Yeah, that's quite a story right there, and I guess you didn't get fired.
I didn't get fired, no, but I ended up leaving,
yeah, right,
about a year later, but no, not because of that.
Yeah, you left on your terms. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this segment with Kevin Campbell, Executive Vice President, the Bank of Manhattan.